Hey guys, so today we're going to go over the I was absent for the entire year and need to learn everything to pass the Regents packet. Let's go. So I have to start off by saying that I did get through about an hour and 10 minutes of this video a few minutes before, and unfortunately it was deleted. So if I am out of patience for certain things and speed through things, it's because I'm so frustrated that I lost the first version of this. But here's round two. Maybe it will be better here. All right. Geography. The first question or two will always have to deal with geography or the colonies. So, know that the New England colonies have lots of natural harbors, a short growing season. They're into nautical things such as shipbuilding and fishing. And the southern colonies are going to be plantation or agriculturally based, farming based. They're dependent on slave labor. They have long growing seasons because it's warmer there for a longer part of the year. When it comes to the oceans, they have a strong influence on our nation politically because geographically we are isolated from a lot of Europe. When Hitler tried to invade Poland, it was easy for him. It's right next door. When Hitler wanted to drive a tank to France, it was easy for him. It was right next door. But if they want to drive that tank to the United States, it was not as easy. There's a gigantic ocean in the way. Same thing goes for England. When they had colonies over here, it wasn't all that easy to just send a boat and collect tax money and send a boat back. Or just send a boat over, put down a rebellion and then head back. No, it would take a long time to cross this ocean, especially when you don't have any boats with engines. So our geographic isolation has helped us grow as a nation into the point that we are today. So that is how rivers affect us. Our harbors, especially New England colonies, are important for commerce. Commerce always means trade. You see commerce, you think trade. Especially at a time when planes and trucks are not invented yet, you have lots of natural harbors that allow us to do trade. One of the major reasons that Boston and New York are major cities today is because of their natural harbors from back in the day, such as New York Harbor, Boston Harbor, that. The Proclamation Line of 1763. You don't necessarily need to remember the 1763 because this is the only proclamation line I put on the test. Basically, it is a line that is set at the Appalachian Mountains where England tells the colonists, do not pass that line. England is trying to keep the colonists safe and also save some money by keeping the colonists within the colonial regions. This way there's less conflict with the French and with the Native Americans. When anything is great, it's going to be large. The Great Depression wasn't a great time. It was great because it was such a large depression, such a large-scale depression. 25% of the population unemployed. The Great Lakes are great because they are huge. Some of the lakes are bigger than some countries. When we look at a map of the United States, we can see that the Great Lakes are huge because of their great size. The Great Plains are great because they're large. A plain is a very flat piece of land. Great because it's big. You drive across Kansas, and all you got is corn, gas station. Corn, cow, gas station. It's very flat. It's a great plain. And if you weren't sure of that, you look at your packet, you got a flat, grassy region between the Mississippi River and Rocky Mountains. All right, moving on to the colonial period, we're going to start off with triangular trade. Triangular trade literally forms a triangle. Hopefully you remember from global studies where slaves would be picked up from Africa, brought over the Caribbean, a little sugar exchange, head up the coast here, head over to England, back down to Africa, across to these colonies over here, back over here, forming a triangle. This is how a lot of the trading was done, especially with the slaves, the Middle Passage. Mercantilism. Mercantilism, specifically British mercantilism with the American colonies. Let's pretend that this is the 13 colonies and that this is England. The way mercantilism is going to work. The colonies provide the mother country, or England, with raw materials. Raw materials such as wood, coal, cotton, what have you. Those raw materials are then turned into finished products, such as clothing, such as furniture, whatever it may be. Those finished products are then sold back to the colonists. The colonists serve as a market to sell goods to. So the colonies are providing the mother country with raw materials. Those raw materials are then transformed into finished products, things that consumers would buy, and then sold back to the colonies, because now the colonies are providing a market for the mother country. Therefore, the mother country is making a lot of money. They're getting basically free raw materials, to turn those raw materials into goods, and then selling them back to the colonists for a jacked up price, for lots of money. It wasn't always like that, though, ladies and gentlemen. It was not always like that with mercantilism, because there was something called salutary neglect prior to this. Now, when I think of neglect, usually I think of Sarah McLachlan with the ASPA commercials. You know, the one with all the puppies and kittens in the cage, and you just want to cry. It's like, yonder the angels far away from here. You know, it's all sad. It's neglect, child neglect, animal neglect. But this is actually a good kind of neglect. The salutary neglect equals self-rule and self-government for the colonists. Britain is so busy and preoccupied with other parts of the world. Remember, they got colonies in India, China, they're down in Australia, a little influence down in Africa, in the Caribbean, Canada. They're so focused on so many other things that since the colonies used to be British citizens, well, we'll let them be for a little while. So for decades, the colonists practiced salutary neglect. Through Virginia House of Burgesses, the Mayflower Compact, through town hall meetings, New England town hall meetings, colonists are constantly practicing self-rule. It's not until the French and Indian War that mercantilism comes into play. And if you remember from the beginning of the year, me jumping around, saying we've got a period of salutary neglect, a healthy ignoring of the colonies. Salutary neglect is all good for the colonies. But then the French and Indian War comes by, where Britain has to protect the colonists from the French and the Native Americans. After Britain drops a lot of money on that war, they decide, you know what? We're treating you like the rest of our colonies. We're going to have to tax you for the protection. We're going to have to get involved in some of the rules. We're going to force you to follow the proclamation line because we don't want to cause any more problems. And what that does, that policy shift from salutary neglect to mercantilism, it angers many of the colonists. And all of a sudden, you're going to have the colonies split between patriots and loyalists. Patriots, supporters of independence. They got used to this whole self-rule and self-government. They had their own businesses. But what mercantilism did was interfered with their businesses. The taxes made them lose money, and they weren't happy. And they said, you know what? Forget this. We want out. But you also have many people that say, what are you, crazy? How? What do you mean? We're just going to break away from England? Like, we are English. What do you mean? Like, we're going to just get up and fight the strongest military force at the time? I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. So you have patriots, you have loyalists, but then you also have a lot of people I like to call fence sitters. They're right on the fence. You know, really indecisive, can't make up a mind to save their lives. I'm sure you know someone out there who just cannot make up their mind, no matter what options you give them. So, what many of those in the middle undecisive people did was they read our boy T-Pain, Thomas Paine. They read his articles called Common Sense. And what Common Sense did was it persuaded people to support independence. It took all the people that weren't really sure if they wanted to support it or not, and it gave them, it said, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. It makes common sense. Yeah, it's common sense, it makes sense, let's be independent. Woohoo. So we have a big war, American Revolution. Yeah, all great and stuff. Get our independence. No, I'm going back here. Before we get to the war, forgot all about the Declaration of Independence. Guys, the Declaration of Independence is a literal list of problems that we have with the government, that we have with the government of England. So it's made up of different parts. A list of all the ways that we think government should work. A way the king has violated that. A way the king has violated that. A way the king has violated that. And in conclusion, deuces, we're gone, goodbye, here's my signature, Declaration of Independence. It was inspired by John Locke. Life, liberty, and property, or we're looking for life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We wanted this independence because of all the different kinds of taxes that were going on. The Sugar Act, Stamp Act, Townshend Act, Quartering Act, all that stuff. So we fight the war, we actually win somehow, some way. Now what? We need a plan of government. There is none. We're a brand new country. It's like walking into a classroom with no teacher, no rules, nothing on the board, and say, okay, how are we going to make this into a learning environment? We've got nothing, not even a book. All we have are some thoughts. First attempt. Oh, is that my computer's going to die? All right, let's pause this. And the janitor stepped in for a moment there, but we're back. All right, where were we? Okay, so political parties, yep. Flexibility of the Constitution. The Constitution is flexible because the elastic clause are the necessary proper clause. When it comes to the unwritten Constitution, guys, that is the government practices that are based on custom and tradition, not physically written in the Constitution, but just accepted, like political parties, things like that. The president's cabinet, that's out of the president's cabinet and lobbying, that's part of the unwritten Constitution. The president's cabinet is a group of people that are really smart about stuff, and they advise the president. They're picked by the president. They have to be approved by the Senate and the House of Reps, but basically they're the president's closest friends in making decisions. He can't just do it alone. When it comes to George Washington, he is known for his proclamation of neutrality. He was a great president because he told the American people that, hey, I know it's tempting to get involved with all the other stuff that the Europeans are doing with their imperialism and all that, but you need to focus on yourself, young country. We are not yet strong enough to go getting involved with the world. We have to focus at home so we can develop into a stronger country. And many presidents following him follow a policy of neutrality, a policy of isolationism, a policy of not getting involved. It's not until really after World War II that we're publicly saying, like, hey, we're a world superpower, we're involved in this. It takes a long time to get there at that point, guys. President George Washington strengthened the power of the federal government. Everything he did strengthened the power of the federal government. He could have easily failed as president, and the Constitution would have been thrown out, and it would have been a whole new start at the government. But by proving himself, in such as the Whiskey Rebellion, where he tells a bunch of farmers that are rebelling, like, hey, knock it off. Knock it off. The federal government's not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. And pretty much everything that he does, especially stepping down after 2 terms, sets a great precedent. By stepping down after 2 terms, he proves to all the people that were skeptical of this new government that he wasn't going to just become king, that he could step down. And from that point on, every president stepped down after 2 terms, except Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Once Roosevelt serves the 3rd term and dies in that term, they pass an amendment that specifically says, step down after 2 terms. Alexander Hamilton is the first Secretary of Treasury of the U.S. He supports a national bank. There is no bank, no national bank. He wants to create one. He is a federalist. He is a supporter of this national bank. And he uses the elastic clause to justify doing that. Guys, a protective tariff. Hopefully you remember my pencil example. Here I have an Expo marker made in China, Expo marker made in the U.S. They're basically the same thing. The one made in the U.S. costs $2. The one made in China costs $1. Your average consumer is going to buy the one for $1 because it's cheaper. Now the United States wants to protect American interests and business and wants you to buy the American one and not the Chinese one. You say, well, American government, I'm going to buy the cheaper one. So what the government does is puts into place a protective tariff where they charge this company $1.25 to sell it in the United States. So now this company is forced to sell for $2.25, and the American Expo marker is still only $2. So instead of buying the Chinese one for $1, you're going to buy the American one for $2. Because the Chinese one is no longer $1 because there's $1.25 protective tariff on it. Thomas Jefferson opposed the national bank. Thomas Jefferson was a strict constructionist. Alexander Hamilton was a loose constructionist. While President of the United States, Mr. Thomas Jefferson does something that's a little loose. The guy decides to, and you know what, I think I'm going to be done with this for now. He decides to buy the Louisiana Territory from France. Mr. Napoleon says, hey, Mr. President, for $10 million, I'll give you the Louisiana Territory, and it will geographically double the size of your country. Mr. Thomas Jefferson says that sounds like an opportunity that I can't pass up. So he buys that land for $10 million, which gives us full control of the Mississippi River, a river that spans technically all the way up in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and travels down all the way across the country and into the port of New Orleans. It's good stuff. Especially in a time where airplanes and trucks, they just don't exist. All business is done on boats, so it's a big pickup. He sends Lewis and Clark to explore the new land. Lewis and Clark are looking for a waterway similar to the Mississippi. The Mississippi River runs north and south. Wants to find east and west, or a northwest water passageway connecting to the Pacific. Although they don't find it because it doesn't exist, they're still able to make some great exploration with their homegirl, Sacagawea. This focused the U.S. on westward expansion. Westward expansion, also known as manifest destiny, that it was the United States' destiny to be from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and anything that gets in our way, whether it be mountains, Native Americans, or whatever, we were not going to let it stop us, because it is the United States' destiny to westwardly expand through all this land. I think we've done an alright job doing that. Like I said, John Marshall, Chief Justice of the U.S., he expands the power of the federal government. When anyone in the federal government does anything, they are expanding its power. The War of 1812 is where the United States national anthem was written, or the Star-Spangled Banner. Some people call it the Second War for Independence. Britain comes back. They are impressing our sailors out at sea. And they were not impressing them by giving them a lovely tune and dance and, oh, I'm so impressed by your appearance, young American. No, impress means to kidnap. They were kidnapping our soldiers and forcing them to fight a war with them on their side against France. So we get into this War of 1812. The United States once again finally proves itself, and a huge feeling of nationalism flows over the nation. James Monroe and the Monroe Doctrine. Monroe tells Europe to stay out of Latin America. There's a reason, ladies and gentlemen, that so many people speak Spanish here. It's because of the influence of Spain. There's a reason they speak Portuguese in Brazil. Because of the influence from Portugal. What America says in the Monroe Doctrine is stay out of the Americas, you crazy Europeans. You're not allowed over here. And people actually do listen to James Monroe for the most part with that thing. Not necessarily because they're afraid of the United States, but just because they're all preoccupied with their own stuff. President Theodore Roosevelt, a bunch of years later, decides to add this little Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which allows us to be almost like the police officers of the world. We use the Roosevelt corollary to justify going down to Panama and building a canal on their land. Any questions about the Panama Canal? Come see me. Andrew Jackson, spoils system. To the victor goes the spoils. The person that wins the war or wins the election should get the prize. The spoils system is putting your own political party supporters in office. Whig Party, Andrew Jackson. The Erie Canal. In a time where there are no boats, there are boats, where there are no planes, no trains, no trucks, it's very helpful to travel on the Erie Canal. It literally connects the Great Lakes, just this whole region right here, to New York City, which is a major trading port, obviously. So you've got the Erie Canal, which cuts across the state of New York, dumps into the Hudson River, go down the Hudson River into New York Harbor, and you're right there and access to the ocean, which gives you access to the rest of the world. Going into a little westward expansion, we have the gold rush. Forced many people to move out here. They get word there's gold. It's nowhere near as big as they play it out to be, but people are willing to take the chance, travel out west for some gold. The Homestead Act was a way to try to settle the West by providing almost 40 acres of free land to anyone that would move out here and develop it. We're trying to push the Native Americans out of this land and settle it for us. Manifest destiny. We want it. So if you were willing to live out here for 5 years and do some farming, well, then the government would give you land out in the Great Plains or the large plains. A plain is a flat, grassy piece of land. It's great because it's big. Where you're driving through Kansas, you just got corn. Gas station, cow, corn. Gas station, not much to see out there. We've got a transcontinental railroad coming across, guys. By the mid-1800s, the railroad is becoming a huge gold nation. So now we can transfer things across the country by rail. Abolitionists do not like slavery. They want to make slavery illegal. A major problem at the time that eventually leads our nation into a civil war where hundreds of thousands of people pass away is the spread of slavery. So, Missouri Compromise. How are we going to admit new states into our country without causing major problems? Many northern states have already banned slavery. They think it's immoral. A lot of the world thinks slavery is immoral. But the southern economy depends on slavery. Guys, no matter how wrong you may think things are, when it comes to money, certain people are unable to see the morals of it and think, well, if it's going to cost me money, I don't know. So, southern states are in favor of slavery. The plantation system is how they make their money, make their living. Many of the northern states have already moved in a direction where we don't really need slavery. They don't, because especially by the mid-1800s, factories are booming up here, you know. It's not how that they don't need it. But the question is about representation in Congress. If you have too many free states and not enough slave states, well then the federal government's going to be loaded with these free state type people. So every time a new state gets into the union, it's a big deal. So Missouri Compromise, it's like, okay, well, how can we put a Band-Aid on this big open wound? All right, well, we'll make this a free state. It's a slave state. This is a free state. We'll make this one a slave state. Make this one a free state. This one a slave state. And they try to play that walking on eggshells type thing for a few years. It kind of works, I guess. Then you have this idea with the Kansas-Nebraska Act of popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty, where the people decide. This could cause some problems. Because instead of the Missouri Compromise, where we have free state, slave state, free state, slave state, now you're letting the people in that state decide. So what if they're like, free state, slave state, free state, slave state. Now you're throwing off the balance of power. Now you're going to have a bunch of southern states that say, you know what, I'm getting pretty fed up of this federal government, of this system, of this federalism. I'm believing states' rights. You have a huge conflict brewing between abolitionists who want freedom and southern statesmen that do not believe that slavery is as wrong as people are saying it is, especially when you're dealing with people's money. The plantation system needs slaves to work. After the Civil War, the plantation system is replaced with sharecropping. Looking through this packet, when you see Missouri Compromise, Compromise 1850, Kansas-Nebraska Act, Bleeding Kansas, those are all examples that led to the Civil War. They all led to the cause of the Civil War. They increased tensions. You would read The Liberator if you were a supporter of abolition. Dred Scott versus Sanford, where the Supreme Court decision ruled that Congress could not ban slavery in territories. Basically, it was a benefit for slave owners. It's 6 o'clock. We're at the U.S. Civil War. We should be halfway through page 9 now. I'm going to call it a day. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, the Underground Railroad is a series. The Underground Railroad wasn't necessarily all underground, but it was an effort to try to free many slaves. Abolitionists want to end slavery. Abraham Lincoln's major goal was to make sure the southern states would not secede, but they do. The day Lincoln is elected, South Carolina secedes from the Union or leaves the Union, and a few other southern states follow suit, and they become the Confederate States, all over the status of slavery. Sectionalism is the dividing apart of the country of North and South. Abraham Lincoln, his main goal, like I said, was to preserve the Union or keep the states together. The North were better to fight the war. That's okay. The North was better prepared to fight the war. Most of the industry was located within the North, and they had an advantage there. Lincoln's plan of Reconstruction was to rebuild the South quickly. He wanted to bring the states back, the southern states back, as soon as possible. And although over 300,000 people die in the Civil War, he doesn't believe that the South necessarily needs to be punished, that we should forgive Southerners, welcome them back in the Union, and move on. Radical Republicans want harsh punishments for the South, and they oppose Lincoln's plan there. Lincoln is assassinated by a radical Republican, someone who was so against his not harsh treatment of the southern states. Constitutional amendments during Reconstruction. We have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment are passed. They abolish slavery, get rid of slavery. They grant recently freed people their protections that are given under the Bill of Rights. And the 15th Amendment allows African Americans voting rights. The southern states' response to these constitutional amendments are the Jim Crow laws, the black codes, poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses. Those are all ways that southern states were able to still maintain their sectionalized way of life and try to go against the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. Basically, Jim Crow, black codes, poll taxes, literacy taxes limited the effectiveness of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Plessy versus Ferguson said that segregation is all good. It said separate but equal is okay. As long as this group has a water fountain and that group has a water fountain, it's all good. That's Plessy versus Ferguson. Brown versus Board of Ed, which comes about 50 years later, says that segregation is not all good. It overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. The Jim Crow laws don't end until the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is passed by Lyndon Johnson. Sharecropping is the system that replaces the plantation system. The plantation system requires slaves. There are no more slaves. Sharecropping kind of replaces that. Industrialization, Industrial Revolution. What do we got here? The mechanization of agriculture. Ladies and gentlemen, by adding new machinery and new technology to farming, the production increases. New technologies, new methods of production are going to increase output. During the Industrial Revolution, many business practices eliminate competition, such as monopolies, trusts, and pools. They eliminate competition between businesses. It's like if you didn't have an option of where to go eat dinner. You only get to go to McDonald's because that's all there are. I can only go to McDonald's because that's all there are. We have competition. We've got Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King. You got your local pizza place. You've got a restaurant. We have so many choices. They're all competing for you for dinner. During the Industrial Revolution, the gap between rich and poor grows. People living in poor, poverty-stricken communities, such as tenement houses. Yet we also have leaders of the Gilded Age, Carnegie, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan. We have a largening gap between rich and poor during the Industrial Revolution. A tariff is a tax. A tariff is a tax. A tax is a tariff. A tariff is a tax. Social Darwinism is survival of the fittest. If you're a social Darwinist, you accept the fact that, hey, there are poor people. They're there because they weren't fit to survive and be better. Social Darwinists go hand in hand with laissez-faire. Social Darwinists believe that, hey, there's poor people, that person's poor because they chose to be poor. They made life decisions that put them in that place. I'm rich and successful because I made life decisions that made me there. Because I'm just better fit to survive in this society. Social Darwinism. It was used to justify the formation of monopolies and also explain the income differences between the rich and the poor. It believed that the economic success comes to those who are most hardworking and competent. Laissez-faire capitalism is laissez-faire. It's pretty much the same thing. Laissez-faire, government hands off. Laissez-faire capitalism, government hands off when it comes to the economy. Government should limit any interference or involvement in the economy. Big business rises because of trust and monopolies. Two ways of looking at people like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Morgan, Vanderbilt. You could either look at them as robber barons, leaders of big business who use ruthless tactics to get ahead. Or you could look at them as philanthropists, people who made a lot of money but then gave back, built things like Carnegie Hall, donated libraries to the city and gave back. Two ways of looking at them. Either these leaders of the Gilded Age were robber barons stealing from the rich on the back, stealing from the poor in order to get rich, or they were philanthropists, people who gave back. Two ways of looking at it. Urbanization is the idea of cities growing and urbanizing. Industrialization and urbanization go hand in hand, moving from the countryside and into the inner city. Jacob Riis, Upton Sinclair, they are muckrakers. They expose problems of society. Jacob Riis took pictures of people living in urban slums, such as tenement housing, and exposed some of the working class conditions they were exposed to. So you'd be an upper middle class person picking up this book, reading this book, and saying, wow, there are some inequalities in this society that we need to deal with. And that gives rise to the progressive era. The progressive era tries to fix the problems of the Gilded Age. Before I get to the progressive era, I want to talk about some of the things that got us there. Nativism, group of Americans who are angry about immigrants taking their job. They want a quota system to limit immigration. Chinese Exclusion Act, Gentleman's Act, National Origins Act, all dealing with anti-immigration. And things that got us to the progressive era. The progressive changes were things like the Interstate Commerce Act. Interstate is between states. Commerce means trade. The Sherman Antitrust Act. Antitrust, anti-against trust. If trusts eliminate competition, then an antitrust is going to try to restore competition. They call our boy Teddy Roosevelt the trust buster because he advocated to eliminate this trust to try to promote healthy business practices. The Federal Reserve System is still used today. It was a way to help stabilize the economy.
So we're all going to eat. Fine.
And now I'm going to eat. But when I get back, we will talk about the progressive era and how it fixed the problems of the Gilded Age. Okay, progressive era. The 16th Amendment, as it was shown on a Regents question today, the 16th Amendment by the income tax. That is why now, every time I get a paycheck, the government takes a little bit out. The progressive movement was an age of consumer protection, women's suffrage, and the right to vote, the secret ballot, income tax, direct selection of senators. Anytime there's a direct election, the people are participating in government. It's an example of giving the consent of the governed. The governed, the people, are giving their permission. Progressives believe that the government needs to regulate big business in order to protect consumers, people like you and me who are buying goods, and also to protect workers. They were opposed to laissez-faire. Laissez-faire economics of the 19th century meant government had hands off. The progressives, such as Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Taft, they were all trying to create government programs to help respond to the problems of industrialization and urbanization. Industrialization and urbanization were great for bringing immigrants into the country, for growing our country bigger, but there are some negative side effects that came along with that, such as crowded settlement houses and now new kinds of pollution and overcrowding of cities. Also, children were forced to work long hours. People were working long hours with low wages. So the progressive era works to fix the problems of the Gilded Age. Jane Addams, if you see her name, you associate with the settlement houses, houses that assisted the poor. It's a response to these tenement houses, now settlement houses, correct those problems. I'm not sure if I misspoke before. Settlement houses are places for people to gain education and better their lives. Tenement houses are overcrowded apartment buildings, usually run down. Webb Du Bois, he formed the NAACP. This is a movement to try to end segregation and win equal rights. It combated the decision of Plessy versus Ferguson, which supports segregation. Now Webb Du Bois wants to end segregation. Booker T. Washington believed that African Americans should pursue an education in order to overcome inequalities. If you see initiative, referendum, recall, direct primary, and secret ballot, those are ways to increase the people's participation in government. The 17th Amendment is the direct election of senators. Remember, you see direct election, that's people like you and I directly voting on electing someone. Civil service exams. This is when you take, if you want to be a police officer, a firefighter, you want to work for the government at all, you take a civil service exam. It's a way of combating favoritism. Andrew Jackson had that spoil system where he put all of his friends in power. Well, the civil service exam tries to level the playing field so that all people have the opportunity for those kinds of jobs and to make it less of who you know. It eliminated patronage. Shit. Labor unions, the point of labor unions is to fight for workers' rights. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was a tragedy in which many women were killed. It was instrumental in bringing about changes to factories. You see American Federation of Labor, that is an example of a union. Pure Food and Drug Act, Meat Inspection Act, muckrakers, they're all associated with each other. Provided consumer protection, created sanitary conditions. I think you guys have a lot of experience with that. You know, people like Upton Sinclair, Jacob Riis, Ida Tarbell. The Populist Party deals, they are against banking and railroads. The Populist Party was primarily made up of farmers from out west. They wanted the government to own the railroads to try to combat the corruption of the railroads. The railroads were privately owned, therefore they were out to make a profit. They made a profit on the backs of the farmers, so they wanted the government to own it to try to eliminate some of that corruption. Theodore Roosevelt. Square deal. He believed that the American public deserved a fair and square deal. That is why he became known as the trust buster, attacking monopolies, trusts, and pools. He wanted the government to regulate big business. An advocate of big stick policy. Walk softly but carry a big stick. The idea of saying it quietly, but saying it like you mean it. Just get it done. But behind me, I've got my muscle. The guy went on and he built the Panama Canal, or was responsible for the building of the Panama Canal. Important to the Panama Canal is it increased the decreased the time period that it took to take ships from the East Coast to the West Coast. Build a canal in Panama, you go right through there. At first, Panama wasn't about giving us land for a canal, but of course the United States goes in and starts a revolution between the Panamanian people and the Colombian people, and we're able to build a canal right through there. Some people argue that this was a little imperialistic, but not so neutral like the U.S. tries to be. But oh well. He also expanded the Monroe Doctrine by adding the Roosevelt corollary to it. He is also, they might show this on the test, he was a conservationist. Remember I showed you the picture of him riding a moose. It was actually a bull moose. A male moose is known as a bull moose. Just like a bull is a male cow. He was not conservative, he was a conservationist. He put away more national park land than any president before him and any president after him. He believed he was an avid hunter, but he did believe that we should take steps to conserve our national forests and natural resources. The U.S. was also involved in a period of global involvement and imperialism during this time. Although we tried to stay out of wars, we had started to expand our overseas markets and raw materials through imperialism, or a policy of extending our rule over foreign countries. Why did we practice imperialism? Well, you can see we wanted to expand the American industry, create businesses overseas, factories overseas. The U.S. needed to obtain more raw materials and new markets in order to keep its economy booming. See terms like dollar diplomacy, protective tariff, open door policy. Hawaii, Philippines are going to deal with this whole imperialistic thing. Open door policy is always trade with China, commerce in China. Keep trading connections open in China. Open door policy. Woodrow Wilson, he supported the Federal Reserve System, limiting the power of big business. He also tried to solve the problems that were caused by industrialization, very similar to Teddy Roosevelt. He adopted a policy of neutrality, or not taking any sides, at the beginning of World War I. The only reason that he wound up getting into World War I was that Germany practiced unrestricted submarine warfare against us. We went into World War I to, quote-unquote, make the world safe for democracy. We were trying to protect the freedom of the seas. Prior to World War I, we were trying to practice neutrality and stay out of the war. Although we get ourselves into World War I, we go right back to that policy of neutrality. During the war, the government does some things to restrict people's civil liberties, such as a court case called Schenck versus the U.S., the Espionage Act, and the Sedition Acts. It was Wilson's way of silencing critics of the war, or taking the rights away of people who were against the war. Although World War I is known as the war to end all wars, it doesn't necessarily do that. Woodrow Wilson's plan at creating lasting peace is seen as a great thing for the rest of the world, but unfortunately our government does not want to be a part of the League of Nations. We believe that if we become involved in this League of Nations, this organization to try to prevent any further wars, that by being in it, we may be forced to get into a conflict that otherwise we would not be in. Alright, so 14 points. Plan of lasting peace. The 14th point is the League of Nations. The U.S. never winds up joining it because, as you see, Congress refused to sign the treaty because they thought it might bring us into another war. 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. During the Progressive Era, a major reason that women's suffrage was ratified or put into place was because of women's role in World War I, of taking the jobs that men had while they were away at war. Leaders like Susan B. Anthony, Carrie Chapman Catt, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they're going to be huge advocates of women's rights. You may also see Susan B. Anthony as an advocate for African Americans. When I say advocate, I can replace that word with supporters. I am an advocate of you getting a 100 on the Regents by looking at your Regents Review packet, your Regents Review vocab terms, practicing this, doing that, listening to this, coming to class working hard every day. Those are ways that I advocate for you to get a 100 on your Regents. And if you fall short of 100, at least if a 100 is your goal, you still got a good grade. Let's say you try to get a 100. Trying really hard to get a 100. That's your goal. But you only wind up with a 97. Well, hey, at least a 97 is pretty decent. It's no 100, but it's still pretty high. Set those goals high, and you'll be all right. Roaring 20s, your favorite topic. The 20s are called the Roaring 20s because it was a time of serious social and economic change. The 18th Amendment, Prohibition, the temperance movement was a movement to try to ban alcohol because people believe alcohol is the devil. It works for a little while, but not really. Because once the government tries to legislate morality or make laws to try to teach people what's right and wrong, it rarely works. And alcohol is one of those examples. During this time period of the 20s, there's an increase in nativism, or a fear of immigrants almost. Or sometimes you can look at it as racism with immigrants, and things like the Red Scare, the trial of Sacco versus Vanzetti, some of the activities of the Ku Klux Klan. Those all deal with a rise of nativism. Immigration acts also use quotas to limit immigration from certain areas. You got a summary right there, Sacco versus Vanzetti, but honestly just know that that has to deal with nativism and questioning un-American activities. Harlem Renaissance happened during the Great Migration. The Great Migration is a time period where millions of African Americans from the South head up north to take the jobs of people that had went away to war in particular factories. That Great Migration brought people up north by the 1920s. There's a cultural revolution in areas like Harlem and Chicago, all throughout the nation. This Harlem Renaissance is a period of time where authors and literature and music is produced, a huge pride in African American culture. People like Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, they're all just given a huge renaissance in arts. Flappers rejected traditional female roles of society. I think we know all about the flappers from that wonderful lesson where we were dancing to the music and all that jazz. Economic change of the 20s. People started buying on credit. They started buying things that they didn't necessarily have the money for, but that was okay. People thought the good times never end. You can't afford that? Take out a loan. Here, we'll give you a loan. We'll give you as much money as you want. That eventually leads us to the problems that happened with the Great Depression. Out west, we have an overproduction of crops. There's new technologies in farming that come out. People want to make more money, so they keep growing more and more crops, thinking that they'll make more money. But unfortunately, the more crops they grow, the price drops dramatically, and it's not working. So the 20s are a time of an overproduction of crops, where the farm goods price dropped dramatically. All these poor farming practices lead to the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl is because of poor farming practices. You can't just keep plowing land and plowing and plowing and plowing without anything to hold the dirt down. Because then the giant winds sweep across the Great Plains, lift that dirt into the air, and they head across the nation. The Great Depression starts at the stock market crash in 1929. Like I said before, people were spending money they didn't have. They were buying on margin or buying on credit. Oh yeah, I'll pay you back, I'll pay you back, I'll pay you back. I'll buy a car, I'll buy a washing machine, I'll buy an air conditioner, buy. It's time to make a payment and boom, the market falls out from underneath them. History repeats itself sometimes. Oh, didn't say that. Overproduction and excessive use of credit is what leads us into the Great Depression. Herbert Hoover believes that the Great Depression will fix itself. The capitalist system will fix the Great Depression. All we need to do is wait it out. His advice, just wait it out. Someone's bleeding on the ground. They just got stabbed. Did you take a step back? Oh, it'll work. His wounds will heal eventually. Let's just wait it out. Don't want to get involved. Herbert Hoover, just wait it out. Let's not get the government involved. He took a laissez-faire approach. Called the slums that people were living in. People were homeless in Central Park. People were homeless in the streets of Chicago. 25% of the nation was on unemployment. And he said, let's just wait it out. They called the houses that they lived in, the houses that were basically made of pieces of garbage in public parks, they called them Hoovervilles, after our great leader, Hoover, who said, just wait it out. We wound up getting a progressive president in there, Mr. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who uses the power of the government to try to bring about changes to the Great Depression. I'll be honest with you, he had lots of programs that failed. And he spent a ton of money trying to do it. But people felt the connection to FDR. They felt the connection to FDR because they can listen to him every night on the fireside chats. They could turn on their radio, tune in, and he would talk the people through it of the nation. And he'd try to create program after program to get us out of the Great Depression. He spent quite a bit trying to get Americans out of this. Another thing about him, he really did question, almost overstep his boundaries at times, where he tried to increase the size of the Supreme Court to get more of his New Deal laws through. Some people thought that were against him that he was a threat to this whole system of checks and balances, that he was trying to make the presidential branch too strong. He has lots of different acts or parts of the New Deal. Now, I'm not saying you need to memorize each one of them, but if you do see things like the Agriculture Adjustment Act, the TVA or Tennessee Valley Authority, Social Security Act, the FDIC, the WPA, the CCC, the SEC, all these alphabet agencies, if you see them, you should be able to at least identify that they are part of the New Deal, and that the New Deal is part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It would just be good to know. Like I said, you don't need to necessarily memorize each one of those, but if you see them, you've got to know that they are part of the New Deal, and that the New Deal is a way to try to end the Great Depression. He did have many critics out there. Like I said, people who are more laissez-faire, people in the business world would be against FDR's New Deal program because of the amount of money that was spent on it. It's tough to say if the New Deal actually got us out of the Great Depression, because World War II is seen as the catalyst or the factor that gets us out of that Great Depression. The New Deal raised the national debt, but it did expand the power of the national federal government. World War II is what rapidly accelerates our country. We, the United States, tries for a policy of appeasement when it comes to Germany expanding its territories. We want to avoid war at all costs. We even go as far as to give countries like Britain money and troops and whatever they need to fight off Germany without us actually physically going to Europe and fighting. We want to keep boots off the ground. We don't want to send troops over there to fight because we want to stay out of there. It's a tough sell to the American public to say, let's go to World War II after we had great losses in World War I. The Lend-Lease Act allows the federal government to give money and weapons to Britain in order for them to fight Germany. The Lend-Lease Act provides weapons and a cash carry system to Britain. Eventually we do get in the war though, because the war is brought to us. Once the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, a major military base in the Pacific for us. By the way, the Pacific is on the west coast, the Atlantic is on the east coast, and the Mississippi River empties out into the Gulf of Mexico. You should know that. Anyway, so once Pearl Harbor happens, once they attack our military base, we then go ahead and declare war on Germany, and we declare war on Japan. During the war, the home front, Rosie the Riveter is used as a term to recruit women into different roles during the war. World War II is a total war. It is a total war because there are multiple ways that you can get involved. If you were not able to sign up for the draft and support your country, you could support the war when you go to the supermarket and you can ration, right? Don't take more than your fair share. Rationing means a fair share for all of us. Buy war bonds. Spend money, donate, give your money to the federal government. They'll give you your money back after the war and a little bit of interest, but now every paycheck, make sure you buy war bonds. It's how you can help. Write a letter to a man, that boy overseas that you have a crush on. Keep them smiling. Keep the morale up. Even little kids got in on the propaganda. They watched videos where Donald Duck and Bugs Bunny beat up Hitler. Keep your mouth shut about secrets. Careless talk got there first, therefore he was shot dead before he even made it to the ground. Look, everybody, even the women could help out by donating 10% of their pay to helping out in the war cause. Do less so they'll have enough. Buy war bonds. Protect yourself from the evil Axis powers. Buy war bonds. Keep your mouth shut or you're going to sink ships. Serve your country. Become a nurse. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many ways to help out. Anyway, total war. The GI Bill allows for educational and housing opportunities for veterans coming home from the war. Got rationing, conserving, war bonds. The Manhattan Project is the plan to develop an atomic bomb. Korematsu versus the U.S. placed limitations on people's civil liberties. Specifically, the Japanese. They were taken away from their homes. People who had never been to Japan. American citizens' rights taken away. Our government actually issued a formal apology in the 1990s where we give financial aid to those people, but it's not until 50 years later. The Truman Doctrine. Harry Truman is known as the Truman Doctrine. Wants to contain the spread of communism. Wants to prevent the domino theory from happening. If one country falls to communism, another country falls to communism, another country falls to communism. In the 1950s, we lose China to communism. We want to make sure we don't lose any other Asian countries to it, which brings us into the Vietnam War. The Truman Doctrine brings us into the Korean War, where we pledge financial and military aid to any country that is fighting off the spread of communism. General McCarthy goes on somewhat of a witch hunt, where he's accusing many people of being un-American by supporting communism. Some of the threats were real, but most of them turned out to be him just being very paranoid. The HUAC, or the House of Un-American Activities, is commission is created to try to help deal with this fear of the spread of communism. Nuremberg trials basically show that you can be put on trial for crimes against humanity. That is where the German leaders were trying to be held accountable for their treatment of people during the Holocaust. The United Nations replaces the League of Nations. The League of Nations is the first attempt at a global peace organization. It was a great idea, but it didn't really work out. The U.S. never joins it, even though the U.S. came up with it. Doesn't really work out. The United Nations is still around today. Started in the 1950s, still around today. The second try at it. Almost like the Articles of Confederation are our first attempt at government, but then the Constitution replaces that. The Marshall Plan also goes along with the Truman Doctrine. Both are trying to stop the spread of communism. The baby boom happened after World War II. All of a sudden, millions of soldiers come home from war and they want to have babies. They want to start families. They go out to the suburbs, buy a nice little piece of land with their new GI Bill. They go out and get an education. They get a good job. The 1950s are a booming time in our economy. After World War II, we come out the world's superpower. We do, because the war physically did not destroy the United States. It was fought in Europe. They had to deal with that. When our soldiers come back to our country, then we have the morale going because we won the war. And the economy is booming. Hey, they left in the Great Depression and they came back to victory, to a booming economy. It's all good stuff in that era. Interstate Highway Act increased suburban growth. The 50s and 60s, the suburbs rise, the baby boomers rise. We have a new era of tension, and that is the Cold War era. I don't say the Cold War because wars usually only take a few years. The Cold War era runs from the late 40s to the early 90s. That era of political tension and military rivalry between the U.S. and Soviet Union. It's a series of ups and downs and tensions. Tensions. Not intentions, but tension. Anytime, like in the 70s during Nixon, anytime the tensions decreased, it was called détente. It's the only word with a little fancy accent mark we talk about. If there was an increase in tensions, sometimes it was called brinkmanship. You might see that on there. Brinkmanship. Brought us on the brink of war. An example of an increase in tensions would be the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs under John F. Kennedy. An example of détente or a decrease in tensions would be under Nixon. The other thing you might want to know about Nixon is Watergate, H2O Gate, the Watergate scandal, which eventually destroyed him politically. Cold War. Iron Curtain is the term used to describe the area of the Soviet Union that is dominant. The Iron Curtain is also is the area that makes up the Warsaw Pact. The two sides of this Cold War would be NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, and the Warsaw Pact. A pact is an agreement. There we go. And it's all right here on your packet. Beautiful. The Soviets are the first ones to launch a satellite into space. That sparks us, the Sputnik, that sparks us to make an increased commitment to math and science. And JFK, John F. Kennedy, promises that we will send a man to the moon by the end of the by the end of the decade. And no one really believes him. But it winds up happening by 1969. We do send a man to the moon, a few men to the moon. And we're able to do that. Containment, once again, stopping the spread of communism, stopping the influence of communism from spreading. The reason we go into Korea, the reason we go into Vietnam, we don't want to lose those countries to communism, because if they become communist, fully communist, it's going to be like dominoes, where one falls down, the next falls down, the next, and before you know it, an entire continent is under communist rule. McCarthyism, talked about that. House of Un-American Activities. Look at this. Vietnam, Korean War, like I said, guys, it was a war that was fought to try to stop the spread of communism. The Vietnam War, not only was that war to try to stop the spread of communism, but you also might want to know that it was very, very controversial in the United States. The end of the 60s, early 70s, this war is incredibly stressful on our young nation, where an older generation and a younger generation don't see eye to eye on the war. It's where we got all the great music that we have. It's where we have a huge cultural revolution going on in our nation. It's wild. Kent State, where the federal government shoots and kills 4 college students who were protesting the war. You also had citizens who were spitting in the faces of soldiers and disrespecting them after they just served our country overseas. You just have some really, really tense events going on during the Vietnam War. Civil rights, civil disobedience. We have lunch counter sit-ins, freedom riders, their attempts of nonviolent people who oppose segregation. Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier in Major League Baseball. The NAACP. Brown versus Board of Ed. Let's talk about that. Brown versus Board of Ed overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson, segregation's okay. Brown versus Board of Ed, segregation in itself is unequal, inherently unequal, therefore, Plessy versus Ferguson overturned. Many people aren't necessarily happy about this, and some of them respond pretty violently. Martin Luther King, civil rights movement, civil disobedience, against using violence, bus boycott. Malcolm X, like Tyrell said, it's time to act now. Malcolm X wanted results now. Rosa Parks, civil disobedience. Let's keep going. The Civil Rights Acts of 1963, 64, they dealt with bringing about change. Affirmative Action Programs, Fair Housing Act. Guys, read that stuff. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society wanted to end poverty. That was his goal. Unfortunately, he's unable to really obtain his goal because the Vietnam War interferes with his domestic policy of trying to end poverty. Under Nixon's time period, where we have the detente, he visits China. The SALT talks are an example of detente, where each country decides that maybe they start to get rid of some of their weapons. What ruins Nixon is the Watergate scandal, where the headquarters of the Democratic National Convention were. It kind of set a precedent where the public started to distrust officials. And now we're at the point where we are today, where no matter who the president is, there's always going to be someone out there who openly has a problem with them. Camp David accounts were a peace talk between 2 nations within the Middle East, an attempt to bring about real change in the Middle East. Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Talk about the Berlin Wall. It's the end of the Cold War with Reagan. Trickle-down economics. He gives big tax cuts to the wealthy of this nation. In the past, tax cuts were given to the working class, middle class, and poor, thinking that, well, if we give the working class and middle class poor some money, they'll go out and spend it, and that will spark economic growth. What trickle-down theory says, supply-side economics, says that if you give tax cuts to the rich and you put money in the hands of the rich, that the wealth will then trickle down And it won't just be money, but that money will be turned into wealth. Because the rich know how to make money with money. The rich are going to invest in their businesses and hire more people. The rich are going to open up new factories and they're going to expand their businesses. And they will provide for the rest of the nation in the form of jobs and different opportunities that they create. That the money and the wealth will just trickle down. That's a trickle-down theory. That's Reaganomics. OPEC, O-P-E-C, is an organization of petroleum exporting countries. Countries that have oil. It's an alliance that they have in order to help control the price of oil. This way the United States doesn't have as much of a say. We were very dependent on foreign oil. You may hear that we're trying to stop our dependency on foreign oil, but the reality is that oil is used for so many things, whether it's the production of plastic, whether it's how you get around the city. No matter what it is, oil is essential to our economy. OPEC is a group of predominantly Middle Eastern countries that have an alliance to help control the price of oil. Usually, if we're in the Middle East, we're trying to obtain oil. Oil is a major reason, on many natural resources are reasons that conflicts sometimes come up. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, basically increases commerce or trade. When it comes to this packet, ladies and gentlemen, that is pretty much a wrap. What else could we talk about right now? All right, let's just go over this real quick. House of Burgesses, Mayflower Compact, self-rule, early forms of democracy. John Marshall, you see John Marshall, he's going to either be expanded the power of the federal government or judicial review. Marbury versus Madison establishes judicial review, which is the Supreme Court's ability to review federal laws and see, or any laws, and see if they are unconstitutional or constitutional. Why do immigrants and African Americans move to cities? It's because that's where the jobs were. If you see nativism, it's a fear of foreigners. Federalism, division of powers. Federalism. Circle, circle. Concurrent powers. Powers that belong to the states are delegated powers. Powers that belong to the federal government are, whoa, that's completely wrong. Powers that belong to the states are reserved to the states. Powers that belong to the federal government are delegated to the federal government. That's a system of federalism. George Washington is all about neutrality, isolationism, and non-involvement. The Articles of Confederation were created weak on purpose because of the government, because of people's fear of a strong government. The domino theory, the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan, Korean War, Vietnam War are all about containment during the Cold War. Why did we not ratify the Treaty of Versailles? Why did we not join the League of Nations? Because we want to be neutral. Because we needed neutrality after World War I. Although our president wants us to join the League of Nations, it is the Congress, the Senate and the House of Reps, that decide that that may not be the best decision for our country. The people speak through the Congress and say no. If you see the unwritten Constitution, it's probably going to have to deal with political parties, with the president's cabinet, possibly judicial review. We got involved in World War I because of the boat and the note, the Lusitania and the Zimmerman telegram. If you see a trust or monopoly, it's something that makes the rich get richer. Trusts or monopolies eliminate competition. If you see unions, it's going to protect the rights of workers. It's going to try to eliminate child labor, increase wages for workers. get more fair hours. It's where the idea of the Monday to Friday 9 to 5 comes about. The amendments and the elastic clause try to allow for the changes over time. They try to make the Constitution a living document. The amendment process is how the changes in our country are demonstrated over time. Manifest destiny. It's our destiny to be from the Atlantic to the Pacific. A problem with adding new states was whether they should be a slave state or free state. A slave state or free state. Radical Republicans wish for harsh punishment against the South for their decision to go to war. Radical Republicans blame the Civil War on the South, and they want strict punishments for doing so. Open door policy, trade in China, keep it open. Questions 1 to 3 will usually have to do with geography. Guys, the Mississippi River, the New England colonies, the Southern colonies. Basically, South has large plantations. The North has manufacturing and settles along rivers. The Mississippi River serves as a way to transport goods in the South, goods across the nation. It serves as an important part of the Louisiana Purchase. We get full control of the Mississippi with the Louisiana Purchase. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Zenger, freedom of the press. Title IX, women's school and sports. Women and young girls participate in sports. Lincoln's goal, preserve the Union. Jim Crow, black codes, poll tax, literacy tax were ways that Southern states tried to combat the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment that were passed by the federal government. Good luck. Study hard. Intermission.
How are you doing? How are you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? When you're watching this, go hard at it. Alright, so today class, we have Andy here, one of my students.
Hey, they're matching blueberries.
And today we're going to learn about Australia.